Hello, my name is Rocco Strangio, and I'm the host of the Law, AI, and Money podcast. I bring on attorneys, engineers, and entrepreneurs to unravel the world of AI and to discuss how it'll affect the legal profession. Today, I'm joined with Rachel McCarthy, the executive director of the Milestone Foundation. With over 10 years working in the legal industry, vast experience working with nonprofits, and a degree in peace and justice studies, Rachel hopes to grow the foundation's reach not just statewide, but across the nation. On top of her work with the Milestone Foundation, Rachel is an active member in her community. She's an active volunteer for Make-A-Wish Western New York and was a founding board member of the League of Women in Legal. Rachel's received numerous awards and nominations for the work she's done in her community as well as work she's done in the legal industry, and it's a privilege to have her on the podcast. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Hey Rachel, how
Hey,
you doing?
Rocco. I'm great. How are you?
How's everything at the foundation?
Everything at the foundation is it's going well.
Yeah. I just want to say before we get into our conversation, I appreciate you immensely for coming on. Not just because you're a close friend and you're taking time out of your busy day, but also because you've dedicated yourself now, having moved to the foundation, to doing work that you believe in. And I respect that. And I respect you as a person. And it's nice to have you on. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Rocco. That's really, really sweet of you. I'm happy
Yeah.
to be here.
So, for those of you that don't know, Rachel was at Milestone, the company that I currently work at, and she made the jump to the executive director role at the Milestone Foundation. Can you sort of give a distinction between Milestone and the foundation? Because a lot of people get confused between the two, and
Definitely. Yeah,
I feel like it's something we need to hash out.
sure. So, the Milestone Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it's been around for almost 10 years. What the foundation does is we provide settlement funding to plaintiffs, advanced settlement funding to plaintiffs who
Mhm.
are going through litigation and are struggling to cover their basic living expenses while they go through their lawsuit. So they may know that in a couple months, a couple years, they're going to receive a settlement, but in the meantime, they might have a little bit of financial hardship. So the foundation, the Milestone Foundation, exists to
Mhm.
help them with low cost pre settlement funding to help them bridge that gap until they get their settlement. Milestone, the private company, is in the settlement administration space, more so focused in mass torts. So originally, the founder, John Bear, who founded Milestone, started the Milestone Foundation. Its original name was the Bears Foundation. So it was a little less confusing then.
Yeah.
It went through a name change and now it's called the Milestone Foundation. So the big difference is one is a 501c3 nonprofit public charity and the other one is a private company.
I know you mentioned foundation many times in that description. Can you give, because sometimes that can be misleading,
Mm-hmm.
because I think people think to foundations that some celebrities have
Mm-hmm.
started. Can you kind of give a distinction between the different types of foundations and what foundation type
Yeah.
Milestone Foundation works
Yeah.
as?
So there are private foundations, which are probably what come to mind most often. That's something like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So
Mhm.
it's funded by an endowment from the Gates family, or you may have heard of, the Kresge Foundation or the Rockefeller Foundation. These
Yep.
are private foundations that are funded by families or groups. And then there's public foundations, which is what ours is. So there is not an endowment funding us. We receive, funding through donations, corporate giving, sponsorships, mostly individual donations. So we don't have that same sort of private funding like the private foundations do.
Yeah. And the way you guys can operate is the hope is that the interest that you collect on your cases can then
Mhm.
allow you to refinance future cases, right?
Sure. So let me back up a little bit and just
Yeah.
explain how that works. So the pre-settlement funding that we give is non-recourse funding. So that means that it is dependent on the plaintiff winning their lawsuit and getting the settlement money in order for it to get paid back. If they don't win their suit and they don't receive a settlement, then they don't owe us anything. So they get to keep the funds.
Mhm.
So non-recourse funding is typically considered a bit risky, which is why there are so many for-profit companies in this space, because they can charge high interest on the advances that they provide to cover that risk, to justify that risk. And you'll see if you go to some of the for-profit companies' websites, they will guarantee funding within 48 hours. They don't really care about the details of the case. They just want to give out as many advances as possible so they can begin charging this egregious interest on top of it and
Yeah.
making a profit. So the difference with us is we charge 10% simple interest. So it's just
Oh,
enough to cover, our operating expenses and any interest, the interest that accrues goes back into our pool of funds that we can give out to the next plaintiff in need. So we think about it as we have this pool of funding, we give it out, we charge 10% simple interest. When the funds come back and the interest gained, it helps us to grow the pool of funds that we can give to more and more individuals. So it's tough because we are a nonprofit. We are stricter with the cases that we fund. Like I said, some places will be like 48 hours, we'll give you funding, no
you
problem.
have to vet the cases
Yeah.
if if you're charging such low interest, and for our viewers, that's
Hmm.
the lowest interest in the space by far.
Yeah, by
Uh,
far.
Also for
And
the fact that it doesn't compound
yes, that's another
much.
important distinction. So simple interest means it just accrues on the amount that was originally advanced. So if you were given a $10,000 advance, the interest will just accrue. It's 10% of that 10,000. What we have seen most other companies in the industry, and I will take this moment to highlight, we are the only nonprofit in our industry. We're the only nonprofit organization that
That
does
does
this work.
litigation finance for claimants.
Consumer litigation finance, yes. So most of our competitors, which it's not even accurate to call them competitors, but the other for-profit companies in this industry, they charge compounding interest, which means it grows. The interest grows on the amount as it's growing. So it could be monthly. Sometimes they'll set it up so it's quarterly. So that just means if you were to take out $10,000, the next month you could owe 10,500. The interest
Yeah.
that will grow, the interest that accrues continues to accrue on that growing amount.
Yep.
So it ends up being a really confusing thing for people who don't understand how compound interest works. They might think when they sign their agreement that they're going to be paying one thing, and then in the end they might end up paying a huge chunk of what their settlement will be. And so it's just we think it's really not fair to take advantage of plaintiffs who are already going through something so life-changing or catastrophic, or maybe it's altered the course of their lives, and then to have someone preying on them when they really just need some money to help get them to the next phase of their lives. It's tough. So that was what originally spurred the existence or the creation of our nonprofit.
It's unbelievable. And over the course of my career, I've talked to many claimants who've been in situations where they're waiting for their settlement money and they're at the finish line. And oftentimes, through their own, misfortunes and just bad luck, they've been in situations where they don't have a car or they're behind on a rent payment and they need that money, at least a cash advance,
Mm-hmm.
to get through to the next step before they get their settlement payment, which will hopefully turn their life around.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to sign away their settlement in some cases just to get to the next step to
Mm-hmm.
cover that rent payment so they don't get evicted,
Mm-hmm.
or to get a car so they can drive to work and keep their job.
Or
And
drive to
it's,
their doctor's appointments. I mean, we've
yeah,
seen personal injury cases where people get injured and then they have to be treated. And if you don't have a reliable vehicle to get back and forth to your doctor's appointments,
yeah,
it becomes a slippery slope.
yeah. And in no way should somebody's small cash advance then balloon into something where a for-profit company then is entitled to the entirety of their settlement.
Right,
It's unbelievable.
right.
I mean, is there any regulations in the space that sort of prevent these usury rates from being so predatory?
There's not really any federal regulation at this point. There are certain states that are more, on top of managing this market, and there are certain states that have caps on what can be, what kind of the amount of interest that can be charged over time.
Hmm.
And so there are some states that are a little more stringent, but for the most part, it's kind of the Wild West. It's these, for-profit companies can get away with it because of the type of funding, the fact that it is non-recourse and the fact that it is risky.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that I'm interested in having us focus a little bit more on now that I'm running the foundation is this revisit to policy and helping influence policy changes so that
Hmm.
there are more guidelines in place that protect plaintiffs. And there are places, I think New York State, which is we're based out of Buffalo, but New York State has a bill that's in the House to protect plaintiffs through plaintiff funding. But, these things get stuck on desks and they get stuck in the House or the Senate. And so nothing is guaranteed, but I'm interested in having us play more of a part in getting some guidelines in place where plaintiffs are protected.
Yeah.
And that's also, it's a sort of a touchy subject with a lot of trial lawyers because a lot of them don't like consumer litigation funding for the reasons that you mentioned. They've had their own clients who they've worked so hard to get them a just recovery, and they've worked so hard to help these people, these families move on, and then they see firsthand the client's funds dissipated into, because they
Yeah.
owe on an advance that they took. And so a lot of attorneys are really resistant to recommending litigation funding if their clients are looking for it. And I completely understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen that. And so I understand. But I think that a lot of attorneys also think of it as a necessary evil because they know that their clients might have their back up against the wall and they don't want to drop the lawsuit, or they don't want to end up settling for less than what they could get if the attorney was allowed to take it through to its just end. So, there are those who really will say absolutely not. I won't allow my
Well, that,
client
well, that, and
funding.
I agree with you. I agree with you totally that the reputation in this space for consumer finance, for litigation finance, for claimants is so poor. And it's a
Mhm.
shame because what you guys are doing at the foundation is incredible and almost serves as a model for municipalities, states to operate their own systems where you can offer low interest advances to claimants
Mhm.
and use the small interest income that you generate, because it's not like you guys are making bank out off these cases. It's very marginal. And that's why you have to be so stringent on
Mhm.
what cases are eligible for funding, which is the trade-off. But it's a shame because the space has been so predatory for such a long time that plaintiff attorneys, for good reasons, because they're good advocates, don't want to
Mhm.
sometimes refer out their claimants to a litigation finance company. And then the foundation's brand is hurt by that, and
Mhm.
and so it's important that we have those discussions to separate the foundation from the
Mhm.
entire space, and show why litigation finance can be a positive thing
Yeah.
for
And
business.
I have two thoughts there. I mean, one is, It is. I love the idea of having it be replicable, and it certainly is replicable. But it's hard because it's so niche. I mean, it makes sense in the context of the legal industry. It makes sense if you're speaking to other trial lawyers or judges or people in the civil justice space. They understand what we're doing and why there is a need for the work that we do. And if you're a plaintiff or you have been a plaintiff in the past, you can empathize with our work. But other than that, it's really hard to convince or to explain to other people what we do and why it's important. So
Yeah.
it's really niche, and it's just it's a special model, but it could be replicated, certainly. And then
It
I just
totally.
wanted to highlight one other thing, because there's the idea of litigation finance. It's a very big concept, and it's very broad, and there are different types of litigation finance, which can also lead to some confusion, because typically I think of, when from my Milestone days, when you hear litigation finance, you think of funders that are funding attorneys and firms and cases. And that's
Yeah.
more commercial litigation finance, but that has become very prevalent. And I think that that's typically what people think of first when they hear litigation finance. So I try to make the distinction that ours is consumer litigation finance. So we aren't funding attorneys. We're not funding cases. We're not funding firms. We're only
Yeah.
funding the plaintiff. So I just wanted to make that distinction.
What's the cap that you guys typically lend out to claimants? Like, what's the most you'll
Yeah.
be willing to give somebody?
The
And
cap that we would
for
be
what reason?
willing to give someone is 25,000, and the average size of an advance we give is typically 5 to 7,000.
Okay. Okay.
The idea is that we're really just giving a plaintiff enough to hold them over, and we don't want them to take on more debt than they need. So we don't
For good
convince
reason.
them, or we don't try to talk them into taking on more. We usually try to talk them into calculating exactly what they need. Whereas I think a lot of other companies in the industry might give more than is needed, and they also won't have that same sort of $25,000 cap. I've seen other companies that will give $100,000 to someone, and so partly it's
Wow.
because, again, we are a nonprofit, and we'd rather give five $5,000 advances to help five different families than one $25,000 advance. So a little bit of it is designed because of the way that our model is, but I also think, to give someone $100,000 and you haven't even potentially thoroughly vetted their case is a stressful
And that's
idea.
and that's money that doesn't help additional claimants who may need it as well to
Right,
get by.
right.
I On the topic of policy, um, what ideas do you have for allowing this to grow? Like, do we tap into the IOLTAs to allocate some money to go to consumer litigation finance for
I mean,
nonprofits?
that would be really cool. I'm interested in speaking more with all the different state trial lawyer associations, because I think a lot of the state trial lawyer associations are really well-run organizations, and they have their own executive director who works to manage these bodies, and a lot of them are really active. So I feel like if you could, maybe the IOLTA angle is one angle, or if you can get state trial lawyer associations um, to have their own funds that they fund plaintiffs within their own state, that would be a easily replicable, an easy way to replicate it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, there's so many avenues, I feel like, to getting the word out, to creating models that not just have statewide reach, but nationwide reach
Mm-hmm.
in order to help claimants. There's an interesting thing where I want to say a good chunk of personal injury claimants are dealing with issues where they're dependent entirely on the money to come, and it's very time sensitive, and they
Mm-hmm.
need litigation finance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shame that the for profit side has tainted a little bit the image of that.
I know. And I
That
mean, it it's litigation can take a long time, and a lot of these instances that we see, people are out of work because of the injury that happened, so maybe you work in a job that requires physical, like manual labor, and you have a really bad car accident, and therefore not only are you now injured, you're out of work because of the injury. And so it's like, the saying insult to injury, like truly is adding insult to injury, because the bills don't stop. You still have to pay your expense, your utilities. You still have to buy groceries. You still have to pay your rent or your mortgage. So just because one significant thing happens to you, it doesn't put the rest of the world on hold.
Totally.
So
And everybody's
if you don't have any savings, you're kind of screwed. And most people in this day and age live paycheck to paycheck. I think I saw an article last week or a week or two ago that indicated that a significant portion of our country is living paycheck to paycheck. So if something happens suddenly and you don't have any options, any savings or anyone that you can run to for help, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think sometimes we underestimate how many people in this country. We think of the United States as the wealthiest countries, and in some ways it is, but we have many Americans, tens of millions, if not a few hundred million. I know we have only 300 million people in the country, but there's so many people that, for unfortunate reasons, maybe don't have people to lean on, don't have savings, like you said, are living paycheck to paycheck, and sometimes even somewhat in the hole and just squeaking by because of it. And to get injured in an accident should be no way of then pushing them down even farther.
Right. It's no fault of their own. So,
Exactly.
I mean, I will say we do hear so many stories of people who are really appreciative of the funding that we can provide them, because, it's critical to them. And
how many claimants have you helped over the years, and how long has the Milestone Foundation been in?
It's been, so we really got going in 2017, though it was founded in 2016. So next year is our 10-year anniversary. And we've funded around 900 families, claimants and families, and we've given out over $6 million. So we're really, it might not sound like a lot of plaintiffs, and again, it's because we are a nonprofit, so we have to be more strict in the cases that we approve for funding, but we also have a limited reserve that we can give out. And but to say that we've been able to give out over 6 million since our inception is pretty impressive, I think.
And something to be proud of. If you're a claimant, how can you reach out?
Our website. So we're actually about to embark on a website redesign, which will make it even easier and more user-friendly. But there is a application on the website that claimants can fill out, or there's plenty of options to contact us on the website. Attorneys can reach out to if they're interested in learning more, or if they think that they have a case that the claimant could use some pre-settlement funding. We typically receive claimant requests via the claimant hearing about us from their attorney. So we really don't do online advertising, digital advertising, where we don't spend too much time worrying about SEO, because we don't want people to come to us that aren't a little bit informed of what's going on and what our mission is. And we feel like it helps when we get a plaintiff from an attorney request who says, all right, I'm okay with you doing this. If you have to do this, this is the organization that I would recommend. So, but all the info is on the website, and we're on social media. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook. So we're easy to reach.
And to all the plaintiff attorneys that have been so helpful over the years in building Milestone Foundation's brand and helping to get the word out, on behalf of you, I want to thank them. I know of those attorneys, and they're great advocates.
On behalf of the Milestone Foundation, we thank you. Yes.
They've done such good work over the years, and they're true advocates for their clients.
Yeah.
They're staying diligent on some of the issues that really, really matter.
Yeah, we are lucky to have a a good network of attorneys who are supportive of us and do help us with fundraising initiatives. They do help us with getting the word out there. They do help us by sending us their clients who are in need and, who are likely to get a settlement. So we're really lucky to have a supportive network within the legal industry. But we could always have more. We could always have more advocates.
You guys are going to build it out even more.
Yeah, I feel really good. There's a lot of potential, so I'm excited to be at the helm.
Rachel, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to tell our listeners?
Honestly, I think we kind of covered everything. We were all over the place.
You did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think we did a pretty good job. There's nothing else that comes to mind right now. I'm sure that tonight when I'm falling asleep, I'll think of something that I was supposed to mention here, but I think that we did a pretty good job.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, again, I know I mentioned it before, but huge thank you to you for taking time out of your busy day to come on and speak with not just me, but whoever tunes into this episode. And I wish you all the best with the Milestone Foundation.
Thanks, Rocco. I'm honored to be a guest, and I wish you all the best with your podcast.
Thanks, Rachel.
Talk to you soon. Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Law, AI, Money podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure to like and subscribe so we can keep the conversation going. Thank you.